Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Good evening, LinkedIn live audience. Thank you for joining us as well. This is AI for Developers. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We're still saying that because this is the first AI for Developers of the year, 2024. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you. So what is the agenda for tonight? Well, before the agenda of the night, at the end of the month, we're doing a conference. If you haven't heard, this is our AI user conference. There's a QR code here you can scan for the conference page. It's a 3-day conference. We have 3 audiences with AI user group, marketers, designers, and software developers. So we cover all 3 audiences over 3 days. This is just a few of our partners involved with the conference here. We have DeepMind presenting Gemini. We have Meta presenting Llama 2, we have CodeRabbit, we have Airtrain, we have Canva, we have IBM, we have Hugging Face, we have GitHub, and see the conference website for more. On that note, tonight is the last night to register for a discounted Pro Pass, which is a 70% discount, by the way, and that's $99. We also have the free GA Pass, so if that is more what you're interested in, register for that tonight as well. Tonight is the night, okay? So check out the conference page. It's just down the street. It's 5 blocks from here. So it's SF-based. It's at this amazing building called the Hibernia. It's 4 stories. There's amazing workshop areas as well. So at the conference, there'll be main stage presentations and a ton of hands-on workshops. So check out the conference page for the agenda and see if it's interesting to you. And for tonight's agenda, first we'll hear from Gur, then we'll hear from Meredith, then we'll hear from Emmanuel. At 8 o'clock, if you want to prepare something, come up. And we'll do open mic here for 5 minutes just to kick off networking. So this is by request. So if you'd like to make an announcement, just get it ready. And we'll open up this space right here at 8 o'clock. And LinkedIn will be here as well, listening. So and 8:05, we'll start pizza, networking, etc. And doors will close at 8:50, and that is the plan, 8:50. Okay? So without further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker tonight, Singh. He is the co-founder of CodeRabbit. The title of his talk is Redefining Code Reviews with AI. Without further delay, here is Singh with CodeRabbit.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the intro. So with CodeRabbit, we are working on transforming the code review process using AI. Talking about our journey, we launched back in July. We were fortunate enough to have our initial funnel of customers for the first few months who really helped us mature our product. And since then, we have been getting a pretty good traction. Currently, CodeRabbit is in use at over 400 organizations for reviewing the code as it gets merged into the main code base part of CI/CD pipeline. So talking about the existing code review process, there is some automation in terms of linters and static code analyzers. This is good at finding code styling issues, syntax errors. The static code analysis is good at identifying security vulnerabilities, performance issues. But what these really lack is a context-aware review based on the functionality, the coding practices of an organization, the design patterns that they follow, the intent of the code changes which are being made. And for those reasons, the code review up until now has been largely manual. And if we look at the entire CI/CD pipeline, this is the one part which is mostly manual. Otherwise, the entire pipeline is mostly automated. But manual reviews has its own challenges. It's a slow process. There was a recent study by GitLab which showed that on average, a merge request on GitLab took between 2 to 4 days for it to be merged within the main code base. And this doesn't just slow down the developers, it slows down the project deliverables. It slows down the hot fixes that need to go in and they are urgent. Along with that, there's a lot of context switching that happens within the development team. Once the developer creates a pull request, they move on to the next task and they are fully concentrated into that. It depends on when they get the review feedback from the peer reviewers. It could be the same day, it could be the next day or day after. Whenever they get the review feedback, they have to switch between the tasks. They have to move back to what they had fixed with that pull request. And that takes a lot of time and it's draining for the developers. In many places, code reviews are actually needed. It's part of compliance. That's why industries have to make sure that the code is reviewed when it's merged into the main code base. But in many places, it becomes a mere formality. It's a rubber stamping. In dysfunctional teams, there are personality clashes between the engineers. Sometimes it gets into nitpicking of the issues. And the last but not the least, because it's a manual process, there is a human oversight that happens. And there was the study by Smart Bear. Recently, they published an article which said that a human brain can effectively review only about 400 to 500 of code in a single review session. So if it really goes beyond that, it's hard to comprehend and find the issues. So this is what we plan to fix with CodeRabbit. CodeRabbit is an AI-powered code reviewer that provides a context review feedback with the smart chat feature. In terms of the USP, it accelerates the code reviews. There's a very comprehensive review feedback which is available within few minutes. Depending on the size of the pull request, it takes from anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes for the review to complete. But along with that, and equally important, is the AI insights it provides. And this is we are learning it more from our customers. What they're finding is that it's finding the issues which are often overlooked by humans. Based on the training data that the latest models have been trained on, they're really able to find, and they get the developers, the peer reviewers thinking about the way that they're doing the things. So this is a simplified version of how the product works. It listens to the events from GitHub. Whenever a pull request is created or incremental review is made on the pull request, it does some pre-processing, and part of pre-processing, it gathers additional context that is needed for the review. It gathers the context from the workflow systems. It tries to understand the intent of the change. It looks for the linked issues. If there is a GitHub issue, GitLab issue, there's a Jira or a linear issue which that pull request is trying to address. It gathers that context from the reviews that have happened in the past. There are some learnings which are stored. It gets those learnings. It gets some context from the repository. And it builds this recursive request context. It's sent to the large language models. Currently, we are using GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 Turbo. We get the response back. As mostly all of you would know that there's a lot of inaccuracies in the AI response. There's a lot of hallucination. So we parse the response. We try to suppress the noise. We have certain patterns that we look for. We have certain labeling that we do. After that, we identify if it needs another set of review. If it's needed, we add additional context, have AI do another set of review. This can go at max up to 5 or 10 times. Eventually, once all said and done, the entire review feedback is posted within GitHub. And with that, we maintain the state of the review, which is also stored in GitHub. So in terms of like the core features of the product, it does these continuous reviews whenever a pull request is created. That triggers a review, and along with that, whenever there are incremental changes made within the pull request, based on the state that it tracks, it can identify which specific commits need to be reviewed. It generates a summary in natural language of all the changes. There's two sets of summary. One is like a high-level kind of release notes, which is intended for entire team, including any non-technical folks. And with that, it also does a technical walkthrough of all the changes, like all the files that were changed and what were the changes with that. Along with that, it does assessment of the change set against the linked issues. So whenever a pull request is created, it's addressing some issue. And generally, it is linked with a GitHub issue or a Jira or a linear issue, whatever, depending on whatever workflow system is being used. So it does that first level of validation, whether those objectives are met, and it lists those out. I'll go through those examples later. And then along with that, it also identifies any other related issues within the system which might be impacted with these changes. If there are any duplicate issues that exist, if there are any, let's say if there is like some buggy, brittle code which is broken often, so with this, it would identify and it lists all the issues which were, let's say, fixed around this code in the last, let's say, like 1 month. Next, it does a line-by-line review of each and every diff, which is part of the pull request. The review is posted as review comments on GitHub, and if there are any in the suggestions, if there is any code that needs to be changed, that's posted as committable suggestions, which can be committed within the pull request with a single click. And it does verification of these changes outside of the change set, which is part of the pull request. So let's say, like within the pull request, if there is a code which is being changed, which is referenced anywhere else in the entire repository, so it can do that recursive lookup in the entire repository, and it points out to, it first checks whether the code, wherever it's referenced, whether that has been updated or not. If it's not updated, within the review comments, it posts that this needs to be addressed as well. You can chat with the bot within the review comments. Once the review is posted, you can ask more questions to the bot. You can provide more context. You can have the bot rewrite the code, have it write like test cases, unit tests, things like that. And another interesting feature with this is, like when you have conversations with the bot, we parse those conversations, and out of that we identify the learnings based on the user interaction. So if there is a review which is not applicable for, let's say, organizations' coding styles or the patterns that they're following, so once the peer reviewer or the developer, once they tell the bot, we pass those, we store those as learnings for the future reviews. So when the future reviews happen, then the reviewer has that context that is needed. And along with that, it adds the learnings, and with that, it also removes the learnings. Because over time, the coding styles change, practices change, so some of the learnings become stale. So it autonomously identifies the learnings which are old based on the comment that the developer or anybody in the team leaves. So it removes the learnings. It's pretty important for us that the learnings are always up to date. And through the chat, you can get any insights into your code base. So for instance, you can ask questions like, which are the most frequently changed files in the last 1 month? What are the issues which were closed in the last 1 week? Who are the top contributors in this repository, in whatever time period? So the next piece I want to touch on is there are a lot of tools, a lot of products that are coming in to assist the developers in this journey. So in the AI landscape, this is how we vision it's going to turn out. So for a general knowledge base, you have chatbots like ChatGPT, Perplexity. And then as the developers start coding within their IDEs, we have products like GitHub Copilot, Cursor. But then all the code that is being written, it needs to be reviewed as well. And there are multiple reasons for that. So irrespective of whether the code is being written by a human or by the bot, the code still needs to be reviewed. Because the context is different. When the bot is writing the code, the context is very limited to let's say the class, the function within which it's writing the code. When it's reviewing the code, the context is much larger. It has to look at the entire repository. It has to look at what the intent was, what the issue was that I was trying to fix. So that's where we think there's this need for AI code reviewers. And that's how we are seeing how our clients are using it as well. So now let's look at some of the examples. So I'm not going to do it real time because the code review, the entire process takes about 4 to 5 minutes, but I'll go through some of these recent reviews. These are in open source. So when the review is posted, there is this high-level summary. It lists out what the changes are, what the new features, enhancements, bug fixes, documentation updates, etc. And then there's this more technical code walkthrough. This is really intended for the peer reviewers. When they start looking at the pull request at a high level, it gives a pretty good idea what are the files changed and what were the changes in those. And then it does this first level of validation against the linked issues. So in this case, this pull request is addressing this issue, and it lists out all the objectives. It lists out which were addressed and which were not, which it's not sure about. So for instance, in this case, one of the objectives of the issue was the documentation needs to be updated and update relevant user guides. So those were not updated, and it explicitly mentioned that. And if we look at the change set, we can see that the documentation was not updated. So this is the high-level summary. Now I'll, I guess, take a little bit more into the actual reviews. Can people in the back, are you able to see it? Yeah? Okay. Is it better? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So in this case, for example, CodeRabbit left a review comment. It said it's important to handle the potential undefined values that could arise if the cache does not contain this key. So to this, a developer responded correct point, but it's better to use non-null assertion operation since newly created regex object must be cached. And based on that, it looked up whether those objects which are being cached are always being cached or not. And then it provided this suggestion that this is what you should do, which the developer accepted and said it fixed with this commit. And when the developer leaves this comment, then the bot actually goes in and it reviews that specific commit to make sure that change was actually made or not. Let's look at this learning example. So in this case, the CodeRabbit review complained about the validation, that this isn't being validated, and the developer said that the validation is being done in this simulation file. And then it actually went in, it checked the simulation file whether it had the validation or not. And it found that there's a check load balancing function which had that validation. And there's this analysis chain. So in the reviews, we are providing access to the shell scripts. So AI is generating the shell scripts to do this verification. So in this case, for example, it ran this shell script. And along with this, it generated this learning, which is used for the future reviews. So it is the user has clarified that the validation for the load balancing parameter is handled in the simulation file through check load balancing function. So now, whenever it's going to review the next pull request, which is using the same function, it would know that this is being validated in this specific file. This is another example where it does that recursive verification. So in this case, the user is renaming this, what is this, TEMV contract to a contract, and this is what is intended with the pull request. But with the recursive review, so when the AI did the first level of review, it mentioned that the TypeScript declaration of my contract is updated in the contract type, which should be verified for consistency across the code base. So based on this, we run shell scripts to identify whether it is consistent or not. And with this, it identified that the shell script output indicates there is at least one instance where it's still mentioned in the code base, specifically in this specific file. How much time do we have? 5 minutes, okay. So I had some more examples, but I guess for the sake of time, I'll skip those. So the sign up is pretty straightforward. If you have a GitHub, GitLab account, within a few clicks, takes less than a couple of minutes, you have the CodeRabbit app installed on your repositories, and once it's installed, it starts listening to all these events that do the reviews. You get a free trial for 7 days, but there's this coupon which can extend the trial for a month. Open to questions.
All right, let's start Q&A. And let's start at the front. When you're done asking the question, if you could either pass the mic back to me or on to the next person for continuity. And just please stand so the live audience, the virtual audience can see you too.
You said you update the shell scripts based on feedback. Does it just work with shell scripts, or are there like language-specific unit tests that it'll update as well, just to keep the continuity, like, since you obviously have unit tests anyway, right?
Right. So we started with shell scripts. We are working on opening up another additional commands. We giving it access. We are testing through that process.
Hey, Zahid.
Ajay.
So my question is, so you mentioned about enterprise and then security, especially security. So if you are reading my code base and then using public LLM, so like, how do you manage, like, if I don't want to share my code with ChatGPT or other, do you use third party or you have your own language model?
No, we don't have our own models. We tried with some open source models a few months back. It's nowhere near the quality that we get from OpenAI latest model. So we plan on using the best-in-class models, which happen to be the OpenAI models at this point. Regarding your second question, it's in the privacy policy of OpenAI that it does not use the requests that are submitted through the APIs. So it does its learning on ChatGPT, not through the APIs. And on our side, if you're using our product on open source on the public repositories, then we do some logging, and because we have to improve our product, but we limit it only to the open source repositories.
One more question.
Sure.
So you mentioned about compliant. If we use it AI agent for review, code review, is it compliant, or it have to be a human also have to review the code, right?
Oh, so as of now, I think the compliance needs a human as well.
Okay.
So this, the general workflow is that this, like our product does the first level of review, which makes it much easier for the peer review to come in later and finish it off.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, yeah. A very good product. This is well needed, especially when you outsource. The
Thank you.
question I have is, you mentioned learning, and then you mentioned ChatGPT. So by definition, learning means you're changing the weights, right? The attention weights. How are you doing the learning if you're using ChatGPT, OpenAI? All you're doing is you're getting charged for all the tokens, right, when you do the request? But then how do you do the learning?
So for learnings, we using RAG, retrieval augmentation. We augment the model. So once we have the learnings, when we review that same code or related code next time, we add that additional context. Part of the reviews, once we get the reviews back, we do another level of verification whether it really used that context or not. But it's short-lived. It's only for that specific review.
I think we have time for one last question, so let's do this.
When you say like the repo, the CodeRabbit agent has like knowledge of the entire repo, like how do you manage to fit in the entire context within a GPT model?
Yeah, we cannot. So when we do a review, it's a multi-stage process, and part of that, like all the context that we gather, be it from the repository or the workflow systems, we summarize that, and then once we have that summary, then we create another like a summary of summary.
Okay.
And as we like have additional context, it's just like a recursive summary. We just keep on adding to that.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Let's give Gur a round of applause. Thank you, Gur.
Thank you.
Gur and CodeRabbit will be at our conference as well. They'll be hosting a workshop. So if you're interested, come see us. And with that, let's have our next speaker, Meredith Hassett. Meredith is the Senior Developer Advocate at Canva. The title of her talk is build an AI app with engaging UI UX. So without further delay, here is Meredith.
Hi, everybody. As you mentioned, my name is Meredith, and I am from Canva. You might be asking yourself, why is Canva at a developers event? And I'm here to tell you a little bit about our developer offering within Canva and how you can bring your AI app to Canva's, I forget what the number is. I think it's 170 million users nowadays, and ever-growing number. So it's a really great opportunity to get that reach in a really crowded market as you are developing your AI models and training them. Now, I am not a designer, so I want to add the caveat that this is a UI UX presentation from a non-designer's point of view. So I'm going to take a lot of the tips and tricks that Canva has learned through multiple app reviews, a very long history of designing a great UI product, and how we help you apply that to your AI app to get better user engagement, easier adoption of your application, and help grow your user base even more. So I want to talk you through some of the tips that we have from our experience. We're going to then try to live fix an app's UI using the Canva Apps SDK and App UI Kit, and then I'll show you some more tools that we have to help you if you're interested in bringing your AI to Canva's users. So here are some things we've learned from reviewing tons and tons of AI apps. The first tip I want to look at is looking at this UI. Does anyone see anything that is glaringly not great about it? It's not horrible, but no. So one of the things to consider when we're building our application is what are the boundaries of where my UI is going to live. In Canva, how many people have actually used Canva before? Okay, that's most of the room, awesome. So with Canva, our apps live inside of our side panel. So it is a very narrow but long space. So when you're thinking about actually creating user input space for your application, you need to think about that. So let's think about the vertical layout of our application. By utilizing the vertical space a lot more efficiently and creating more selection opportunities, we're actually able to add more inputs for users that normally would have to be included in their prompt in terms of asking them to get a better result from the AI. Just think about how you can add some prompt engineering to your UI of your application so that instead of having to depend on user input to actually get the best result from your AI, you're actually able to control that by providing them some pre-selected options by better utilizing the layout of this space to actually put those art styles available for the user to select. Another thing we want to think about is, again, anything glaringly wrong here? Yes, there's a massive waste of space here. The actual primary action is at the very bottom of the screen, and I don't know how many, if you have a MacBook and your stupid little thing pops up and you're trying to click at the bottom of the screen and you can't get to it, it's a really painful user experience. So think about how you're, again, using that vertical layout. How are you using your vertical space? Also, the primary action that you want a user to do is to generate an image with your AI, not figure out how many tokens they have left with you. So think again about how you're laying out that vertical space, or depending on where your app lives, how you're laying out your space to be able to best get the users to interact and actually utilize your technology. And a lot of these tips are just kind of focusing based off of Canva's experience, but I think a lot of them do apply no matter how you integrate your AI, if you're building it into another tool or building your own standalone UI as well. Another tip I want to talk about is loading screens. Anyone remember those lovely loading screens from Windows 95 where it would zoom all the way up to 95% and then you would just sit there for another 5 minutes? That last 5% always took the longest for some reason. So when we think about loading screens, having percentages like this, they seem great in principle, but they're really arbitrary values because you never know how long your loading is actually going to take. Another thing that happens here too is because the loading is happening on my input, I'm thinking, hey, maybe I can actually change some of these input values while I'm waiting for that AI. Oh, I realized there was a typo. Oh, I realized I actually wanted to add in this additional parameter to my prompt, or I wanted to change the language that I selected. By considering having a separate loading screen with the option to cancel, so again, you're not wasting a user's time, and also your own CPU resources, you're able to make sure that a user isn't trying to change something in the middle of the process and then seeing an unexpected result because you're not actually considering that. And then you're also removing those arbitrary loading percentage values that mean nothing to a user. Using a loading bar provides the same effect without providing the same expected result in the end. Our fourth tip is around user input. Anyone think where do I actually input my prompt here? Is it obvious where you would input your prompt? No. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking no. Yeah. From the look of this UI, it looks like any one of those 3 or 4 text boxes are places that I could type text, which is really confusing if you're actually trying to get a good prompt from a user. If you want to provide some idea prompts for users, this is probably not the way to do it because it's really confusing from a UI perspective if I'm looking at this of what does this actually mean? What do I have selected? Can I change that text? Can I interact with it? So what we recommend is having a single text box and then some clickable buttons or elements where you can actually then preload that into that text input field. And this creates a much cleaner experience where it's very obvious that these are suggestions and not editable text fields. Another thing that we're going to note around selection here is we've also moved from a drop-down for voice selection to some pre-selected options. When you have a lot of choices, choice is actually the enemy of things getting done, right? So by limiting that selection to the top 3 or the top few items for users, it's going to significantly make it easier for them to make a choice and actually get to the end result, which is the value add of your product. In this case, this is a voice over or voice character AI, so it generates these AI avatars that have voices. We want them to actually see that and see the magic and the value of it. So instead of them spending a few minutes or a few seconds and trying to figure out what voice they want to select and then maybe even getting lost in the process and not actually seeing the value of your product, limiting that selection is going to make it a lot easier for them to actually get to an end product. Along those lines, too, how many people love this drop-down? This just gives you the warm and fuzzies. One person, okay. So one person out of 100 plus. Yeah, this is not a great option for drop-downs. We don't want these extremely lengthy lists when we're searching for things or using drop-downs. So instead, navigating to a search that you can also filter by languages or locales or male or female voice, those options that a user really wants to drill down into because they probably know what language they would like to select, and then they can focus in on those choices. So thinking about the user intent and how to simplify the experience is going to make it more likely that they get to that end result of actually playing with your UI and then purchasing your product. Tip 6. So in here we have another screen from one of our apps. Anyone can see what's wrong here? Right off the bat, no? So I want to draw your attention to there are 2 purple buttons. That means there are 2 primary actions. What is a user supposed to do on this screen? We have not told them. We have given them confusing options. Should they add the image or should they start over? It's always important to focus on having one primary action and everything else is a secondary action. What is the action that you want them to take on that page, and highlight only that one. If you have multiple options to add or to multiple primary actions in your UI, your users are going to get lost and confused and not 100% sure what you want them to do at that stage. And my last tip before we actually try to implement all of these is on this page, anyone have any idea what you can do here? No, I didn't either when I saw this. So this is supposed to be a caption generation app. So what it does is you upload an image and it returns what it determines is in that image. So in this case, it's an eye. But how do I know that that's what we can use it for? So you really want to focus on what is the user intent. the point of this app was to generate a caption. In this option, sorry, I didn't show the original image, but I had like a cartoon image of a cat. The image provides us with the clear indication that the user intent here is, we generated you a caption. Do you want to add that caption to your design? So this would be great from an accessibility point of view. So making it extremely clear what the user's intent or follow-up action once your AI has produced a result is going to make it significantly easier for users to use and adopt your application as well. All of these apps are actual befores and afters of developers, AI developers who have gone through our app building process and gotten feedback from Canva and our team on how their app works, their UI and UX from our years of experience building it. And they've all seen great improvements in app adoption by following these new guidelines that we presented them to help them build better apps. Some of these are like really obvious cases of what is a better experience for users, and some of them are a little bit more subtle. So it's just things to think about and some UI experiences that you can incorporate into your own apps moving forward as well. Now, with that all in mind, I'm going to bring us to our fictitious startup where we have an AI app that generates sci-fi scenes, and we've got to make some tweaks to our app in order to get it live and have users happy and excited to use it. So let's go ahead and try to apply some of this knowledge that we just learned. So meet our fake text-to-image AI app. Let's also keep our fingers crossed that my Hugging Face inference is not down, because that's been happening all day today. So fingers crossed on that one. So a couple things that we're going to think about when we're looking at our app right off the bat is we have a text input field. Do we want to maybe give some users some indications or some examples of what we could put there? We have a button. How do we prevent button smashing? That's just gonna like ram up your CPU usage, and you don't want that. You don't want to be running multiple instances of the same prompt on your models. So how do we make sure that users know that your model is actually running, thinking, and trying to produce a result? And should that button always be enabled? And then how do we hide the no image, making sure that it shows an image when we actually have one? And what about how do we handle errors here as well? So let's go ahead and try to make a bunch of these changes in our app. So I'm going to switch over. So I have my app code here. And then what I do with Canva is I'm going to go ahead and bring up my terminal. This isn't like that important, but basically I have the app actually running here. So you just run npm start from our starter kit here, and this actually runs our source code for our app. Over in our Canva developer portal, you'll find your apps. Here you can easily create a new app. I've already created one for us today, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And then with my app running on my local host, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the URL of where my local development environment is running. And then I can actually preview my application in a development state in the production version of the Canva editor. So here I have my app running on our side panel. Again, when we're talking about the Canva app experience, we are limited to this side panel right now, so we do have to consider that when we're designing our UI, but we're able to add things like text inputs and then generating images to then display on our page. So if we go ahead and try to use this app right now, it should actually just throw in errors because I didn't give it a prompt. But let's go ahead and say city on the moon. So I'm going to give it a prompt of city on the moon. We're going to try to generate image. I have no idea what's going on right now. Is this a great user experience? No, it's not. Because this is when I would just go smash, 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 and run up your CPU usage. Do you want me to do that as a user? Probably not. So we're going to go ahead and trying to make some of those edits to our application. So one of the first things that we'll do here is I'm going to switch back over to my code editor. Can everyone read the code? Yes? Okay, cool. So the first thing I want to do here is for our text input. So I'm using some of our React components that are available through our Canva app API kit, app UI kit. And this actually comes with a lot of preset values or properties that we can actually just utilize, so we don't have to develop them out of the box, and they will be responsive to screen size. So if I go back over to our storybook, and let's go ahead and look at text input. actually, let me zoom in on this one, yeah. So in text input, we actually have a placeholder value. So we can easily add placeholders to our UI elements here. So let's go ahead and add a placeholder. And we'll set it equal to, I believe it's our text input value, yeah. And so that way, when I go back over into my app, and I believe my hot module loading, yes. So we're able to see our preview text here. So if I scroll up to our text input value, I have it set as a state of astronaut riding a horse in space. So now we have some sample text. So also if a user was to just hit that button right off the bat, we're not sending a blank prompt, we're actually sending some text. So they can actually expect a result back and it won't error out immediately. The other thing we're gonna wanna do is when a user hits that button, we're probably gonna wanna set a state. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna go ahead and create a state. So we'll go ahead and create a type of state, which would be equal to, so we'll have like an idle state. I'm a developer, not an English major, so excuse my typing. We'll have a success state. We'll have an error state. Oh, and of course we need a loading state. With this, we can then also create a new state here as well. So this will be our loading state. And then we'll set loading state. And this will be equal to, yeah. And this will be of type state. And we'll start this off in idle. So now, once our state is set to idle, we can go ahead and actually go to where our button on click event is. So again, we have our button, we have an on click event, and we're gonna go look at that on click event. So on our button click, we're gonna go ahead and set the loading state to loading. And then what this will allow us to do is, if we go switch back over here to our storybook, in our buttons that we provide in our app UI kit, we actually have the opportunity to use a loading indicator right on the button. So this will make it really easy to disable that button and put it in a loading state so a user knows that there is some activity happening on the back end. So I'm gonna go back to my button. I'm gonna go ahead and add a new property. So if loading is true, so we wanna check if loading state is equal to loading. And if that's true, then we wanna go ahead and put that loading indicator on our button. But this also means at some point we need to tell the button that we're done and we can switch out of the loading state on the button. So once we actually get a result, we can go ahead and set the state to success. Now if I go ahead and save my changes, go back over to my app. So if I go ahead and let's go city on the moon as my prompt, I'm now able to see a loading state on the button, so I know that it's thinking, and I'm not gonna keep hitting that button because I don't think anything is happening. It's very clear to me that something is happening. Now, for this example, just to keep it really simple, I did that on the button, but for longer loading states, you'll actually want to probably put in a loading page and then have a result page in the end, but just for demo purposes, I want to show you guys how easy it is to integrate that loading state into your UI experience using our UI kit. Now we actually have an image here, but what do I do with this image? Can I drag it onto my page? Doesn't look like it. If I click it, will it add it? So that works. But we want to also make sure that the UI experience is consistent. If I go to any other Canva element, I'm able to drag those onto the page. So I want to make sure that that UI experience is consistent with our editor experience. So let's go ahead and make our image draggable as well. And an easy way to do this is, if we go back to image cards, we actually have an on drag start, so you're actually able to initiate that drag event right from the Canva edit, or from the element. So on drag start, and then we'll go ahead and say on image drag, and I am feeling lazy and we're short on time, so I'm gonna go ahead and steal So in this drag event, we're going to utilize our Canva Apps SDK UI API, and this includes a start drag event, which allows us to tell it what type of dragging or what type of draggable element we are creating. So we're creating a draggable image. We want the preview size to be 100 by 100 pixels. The full size of the image is 240 by 240 pixels, and we're just going to use the sample URL, which is the data URL returned from our model to actually create that element to drag it onto the page. So if I go ahead and save this, go back to our app, oopsies. So anyone have a futuristic sci-fi scene they want me to create? No? Okay, cool. Red moon over a blue city. The model is thinking. Very cool. So now if I drag this, I'm able to drag and drop it onto my page. So it's really easy to create draggable elements for the design as well. Now, what about an error state? What if, for instance, when I was building this demo, the Hugging Face inference models went down multiple times, so we're getting a bunch of 503 errors, and we want to make sure that as a user, you're aware that there was an issue and you want to try again. So let's go back to our query. We're going to go ahead and see if our response, has an error. And if it does, we want to go ahead and set our loading state to error. Otherwise, we can go ahead and keep this same functionality. Now, what do we do with this loading state of error? Well, one thing we can do is show an error message, and it's really easy to do that because we have alerts as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and use an alert. I'm going to go ahead and set the tone to warn, because we don't want it to be like too aggressive. Like critical is like a critical system failure versus a warning is like, hey, like something went wrong, just to give you a heads up. And then I think that was what we want to do. And then we'll just say, there was an error. Please try again later. Cool. Oh wait, but we don't want that showing all the time, right? So we're going to actually go ahead and check. We want loading state equal to error. And then we show our alert. See, we can see. Actually, let's try a farm on Mars. See what it gets. We'll see if we can get it to error out. We might not be able to. No. Oh, that's kind of fun. It kind of looks like Farmville. So we didn't get an error state, but this time we're not seeing that error, so that's a positive. So we were able to use a simple combination of just React development skills that you probably already have in combination with the app UI kit and our app SDK to create a really easy way to integrate your AI into a Canva UI. And with that, I'm realizing we only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back over here and just, we have a bunch of resources. So we have our apps SDK with a bunch of packet or APIs that are available, such as our assets, design, and platform and user APIs that allow you to upload media, add elements to the design, add external links, and also securely access your own backend. I also showed you a little bit about our app UI kit that has over 30 plus React components designed to make it really easy to create responsive and clean UI. And this list continues to grow. It's also available via NPM. Caveat, it's only available to use on your Canva apps. You cannot use this, sorry, for your external apps. We also have a bunch of guides from, again, our years of experience building UX for users and growing our user base. So if you have any questions about fundamentals of design or fundamental design patterns to incorporate in your app, we've got a lot of great guides there. And our app review process, so you submit your app, it goes through a very thorough functional and code review, as well as a UI and UX review. From there, you get a bunch of feedback, which is where a lot of these developers were able to take their UIs from the first page to the second. And we'll give you a lot of our insider tips on how to create a better UX. And then you're gonna go make those changes, resubmit your app, and hopefully launch to our 170 plus million users. So thank you all. I'll open it up for questions. And if you want to learn more, you can find more at canva.dev or join our community at community.canva.dev.
Let's start Q&A. Any questions for Meredith? Let's start here. Thanks.
Hi. Really nice. So as a developer, do I have access to the canvas? So can I create elements and then let's say add a picture and then add captions and add like a bunch of stuff, but without user dragging anything from the website?
Yeah, so you can also programmatically add elements to the page. So one of the other things that I didn't focus on too much here is this add native elements API or method available from our design API. Allows you to like automatically add those elements to the page. So in this case, I was letting the user decide if they wanted to add it or not, but you can programmatically add it as well. And we also recently allow you to be aware of what a user has selected on the page and be able to update and replace it as well, because we know that's a really common use case for a lot of AI as well.
Another thing is, what is your monetization strategy?
This is like the number one question we get. So we currently monetize entirely off platform, so it's up to you how you want to monetize. A lot of our developers choose to do a credits model or a subscription model. So you would have them sign up on your account, but we do enable you to initiate that payment flow from our side, but we don't touch it because we don't want to take money from you. That is entirely your thing. We also do have awards based off of usage. So as your app grows with our audience, you will also receive monetary prizes as well. But yeah, if you want to do monetization, it's entirely up to you how you want to do your monetization strategy. Yeah, that's like our number one question we get.
Any other questions for Meredith? I've got a question. So if we're using your SDK, do we need to use TypeScript or can we just use JavaScript?
It's all designed to work with TypeScript. So it's not required. We've had other developers try to also use Angular instead of React. So you are able to use whatever preferred front-end language that you are comfortable working with, but all of our resources and guides are designed for React and TypeScript.
Perfect. We probably have time for one last question. 1 minute left. Let's do it.
As a developer, do I only have access to the left panel? If you need more real estate, do you redirect them to another website or?
No, so currently all the app is running in that side panel. So that's the only current real estate, but stay tuned. We have some exciting things coming in the next couple months.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are relatively early. We just went to GA back in June of last year. So we're continuing to constantly add new features and capabilities to our SDK. So there's some really exciting things coming down the pipeline this year. So I'm really excited to share, maybe come back and share more of that later.
Well, we would love to have you back. Thanks so much, Meredith. I should also mention Anwar, he's the GM and head of ecosystem at Canva, will be presenting at the conference on Marketer Day. So early in the morning, 9 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. So, Canva is a conference sponsor, and stay tuned for more, potentially a Canva workshop at the conference, possibly on Designer Day. We'll see. We're talking about it. So let's give Meredith a round of applause. Meredith will be around for networking.
Yeah.
So if you have any other questions for her, let's do that then.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. And finally, I'd like to introduce our final speaker of the night, Emmanuel Turlay. He's the founder and CEO of Airtrain.ai. The title of Emmanuel's talk is Evaluate and Compare Proprietary and Open Source LLMs with Airtrain.ai. So without further delay, here is Emmanuel.
All right, thank you so much for the intro, and thank you so much for hosting this event. This is really nice. It's also streamed online, so this is really nice. So today I want to show you how you can use tools like Airtrain.ai to compare various models, and notably how can you compare between proprietary models and open source models, and I will explain to you why this is important to do. So as everybody knows, GPT-4 is really the king. You know, it's the best model, has the best results, it's the easiest to use. Just grab an API key from OpenAI, get started, use their SDK. This is great, okay? Most of the apps out there are using GPT-4, so this is all good. However, it's not all good because GPT-4 is fairly slow. It's a very big model, and even though the inference infrastructure offered by OpenAI is optimized as much as possible, it is still fairly slow compared to other models out there, and it's also very expensive. See here on the right side, it is the most expensive of all the models out there. You can find all this data on artificialanalysis.ai. So GPT-4 is great, but it's slow and expensive. So it makes it a great model to prototype your app. So if you have an idea for an AI-powered app, you probably want to start with GPT-4. It's the easiest to get started. And also, if your app doesn't work with GPT-4, you probably can just forget about it because other models are probably not going to work better. However, as soon as your app is in production and maybe gets viral, you know, gets picked up on Hacker News, whatever it is, then your bill is going to be pretty high. So at some point, you're going to need to start thinking about other solutions. And so one thing I kind of want to talk about is that small models, very small models, can actually perform very well on very specific tasks. So here, there's a paper from Microsoft published last year, I think it was October, about the Phi-1 model. So the Phi-1 model is extremely small compared to GPT-4. It's 1.3 billion parameters, as you can see here in the red box, and it's been fine-tuned on very high-quality data. So they used GPT 3.5 to generate synthetic data of high quality, and they also scraped textbook quality data from the web. And so this model, for its size, performs extremely well. For example, you can see here on the column, the penultimate column, the results on the human eval benchmark, which is a coding benchmark. And you can see that the only two models that beat Phi-1 is at the bottom here, 50.6%. The only two models that beat Phi-1 is GPT-4 and also Wizard Coder, which is the one at the bottom here. And it has 16 billion parameters. So here, what we see is that for a specific use case, so coding, you can fine-tune a fairly small model on a very high-quality data set and achieve similar performance or actually competitive performance with the larger models. So there's a number of papers out there that do similar exercises. For example, there's the tiny models paper from April last year, where they trained extremely small models. So here you can see in the results, you have the first model on the left is 1 million parameter, very small. And what they did is that they fine-tuned model on like children books to generate very small stories for children, and they were able to show that the 33 million parameter model, which is the green column here, performs better than GPT-2 on the far right. It has 1.5 billion parameters. So once again, for a very specific use case, you can take small models, fine-tune them on a high-quality data set, and get very good performance. So if your app is not trying to do a very generic task, trying to do something very specific, for example, extract some JSON out of a payload and out of some text and feed it back to some other API, you may not need to use the GPT-4, which is like the most powerful model out there. So basically, when you're using GPT-4, you're using a bazooka to shoot a mosquito. So maybe you need GPT-4 for your app, but in many cases you don't need it. You need something smaller. Okay. So how can we wean ourselves off GPT-4? Of course, it's the best out there, but how can we get away from it? At some point, I believe that every company is going to have to use a whole fleet of small models that are fine-tuned for specific tasks. They're going to probably run them on-prem because those models are small enough to fit on cheap GPUs. And this is going to be the future of AI instead of always relying on GPT-4. So how do we get away from GPT-4? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to evaluate alternatives. You have to look at other models out there. You have to build yourself an evaluation data set, some test cases, and see what other models out there work well for your use case. So the first step is to start with evaluation. And tonight I'm going to show you two types of evaluation. The first type is the vibe check. So the vibe check, as the name indicates, you're just trying to figure out roughly, get a sense for how alternative model perform. It's not statistically significant, it's just for you to build an intuition. And then once you have this intuition, you have to move on to the next step, which is batch evaluation, which is to generate large amounts of evaluation data so that you can see at scale which model performs similarly. So let me switch into demo mode. So I'm going to switch to my browser here. So if you want to get started with Airtrain.ai, just go to the landing page and just click Get Started here, and then you can log in with Google. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do this vibe check. So we're going to interact with a number of models and compare how they perform. So here we click on Play with Models, and here we have our playground. And so I'm going to add a number of models and compare how they perform. So first, I'm going to add a Llama 2 with a 7 billion parameter. I'm going to add also another open source model, so Mistral AI with 7B, and maybe I'm going to add a couple of proprietary models. So maybe I'm going to add Gemini, and I also need to add my API key here. It is, and I'm also going to add GPT-4 to compare. And also recently today we actually just added Phi 2, the new Microsoft model, so I'm also going to add this one. So here I have all my models in parallel, and I'm going to ask a few prompts just to get a sense of which model performed better. So let me bring up my drafts here. So here's the first prompt that I'm going to try. So essentially, write a short story containing 3 sentences about the AI user meetup in San Francisco tonight. So I'm going to prompt my models, so they're all generating content. And so we can see the first results here. In a vibrant corner of San Francisco, AI enthusiasts gather at the user group meetup and so on. This is Gemini. So, you know, it seems like very coherent and makes sense, with laughter and the hum of eager conversation. So I hope later we can have a laugh together. As the sun sets over the Golden Gate Bridge, well, actually it was sunny today. And then here we have Phi 2, Alice, a regular attendee of AI user meetups, couldn't contain her excitement, and so on. And then a couple of open source here as well. Sure, here's a short story containing 3 sentences. The sun had just set over San Francisco. I actually don't know how they know the weather today because it was actually sunny, and so on. So you get the gist here. We query a whole number of models at once, and I'm going to try a few other prompts just to get a sense. For example, one I often try is the sisters riddle. So essentially, it's a riddle that tests the model's ability to reason. Julia is a girl. Julia has 3 brothers. Each brother has 2 sisters. How many sisters does Julia have? So Julia has 1 sister, and let's see if the models can get it right. Gemini gets it wrong. OpenAI GPT-4 gets it wrong. Actually, GPT 3.5 also gets it wrong. Phi 2 gets it wrong as well. Nobody gets it right. This is actually quite a hard riddle to solve. Most models get it wrong. In the past, I got Mistral Medium to get it right. So you know you can try for yourself later on. Let's try one last example. Let's do some arithmetics. So I'm going to ask the models to evaluate some math expression and see which ones get it right. It's very simple. 2 plus 2 minus 3/4. So Mistral gets it wrong. Gemini gets it right. GPT 3.5 also gets it right. And Phi 2 gets it right. See, once again, Phi 2, 3 billion parameters, gets it better than Mistral with 7 billion parameters. Okay. Why? Well, Phi 2 was trained on very high quality data. So that's one difference. And Llama 2 gets it wrong as well. Okay, so this gives you a sense of the concept of the vibe check. You build an intuition by yourself by querying each model individually like this. But once you have this kind of intuition, you need to move on to the next step, because this is not statistically significant. You only tried maybe a few dozen prompts. As a human, you can only prompt a model so much. So what you need to do is you need to build an eval data set with like ideally hundreds, if not thousands of data points, and then you run those data points through the models. So I'm going to show you how to do this with Airtrain as well. So going back here to the menu, and I'm going to evaluate models. So here I have a form to upload a data set. So I have this data set here on the left here. It's a very big data set of CNN news articles. So I'm going to upload this. I'm going to select here. And then I'm going to configure a bunch of models to evaluate. So I'm going to configure GPT-4 here, selecting GPT-4, set a low temperature, put my API key, and in terms of the prompt, I'm going to ask the models to extract 3 highlights from the articles, and that each highlight should be no more than 2 sentences long. So for example, maybe I'm building a summarization application, and so I want to test how those models do on that. So I'm also going to load up a Llama model as well. So I'm going to call this Llama 7B. I'm going to set 7B here, a low temperature, and I'm going to add the same prompt as well, prompt template. And then a last one is maybe going to be Mistral. So let me try adding Mistral. So naming my model here, and then adding the prompt as well. So now I'm going to send all my articles. So I have 100 articles. I'm going to send them to all those models at once. And so I need to evaluate the output. So in order to evaluate the outputs, as you may know, there is no sort of standard metrics to measure just the raw quality of a model. You have rouge and blue that evaluates the capacity of a model to summarize, for example, or how they perform on translation. But if you're, for example, trying to evaluate how rooted the highlights that were extracted in the original data, there is no real metric for that. So the best way to do this is to use another model to evaluate those things. So we're going to use an evaluator model. So another model is going to evaluate those outputs and score them on a scale of 1 to 5. So I'm going to create a few properties. So for example, the first one that I'm going to rate is groundedness. So here's my scoring prompt. I'm going to read it to you. But essentially, let me make this bigger here. The score describes how grounded the highlights are in the original article. I'm also extrapolating the actual article, and I'm passing a rubric to guide the model to figure out what score to give. So for example, a score of 1, the highlights are not grounded at all in the article. Most statements in the highlights are not grounded in the facts present in the article, and all the way down to 5, the highlights are very grounded in the article. Most of or all the statements in the highlights are directly stated in the article. And I'm going to call this groundedness. I'm going to create a couple more of those properties. So I want to test if the model actually returned 3 highlights. So I have another scoring prompt that I'm going to use here to evaluate that. So I'm going to call this formatting, and I'm going to put this score here. So the score describes how many highlights were generated. So a score of 1, less than 3 highlights were generated. Score of 3, more than 3 highlights were generated. And score of 5, 3 highlights were generated. There it is. And so I'm going to also activate those metrics here just to get a sense of which models are more verbose, which models are better at summarization with compression, and so on. Then I'm going to name my job here at the top, AI user group demo. And then I should be good to go. I'm going to start my run. It's going to do a bit of validation, and then it's going to start my run. So this is going to take a bit of time because it has to ingest the data. It has to prompt the models. There's 100 articles to evaluate. Also, those articles have a lot of tokens, so it's going to take a bit of time. So instead of waiting for it to complete, we're going to look at another a job that already ran earlier and here it is, an example job. This is the result page for this job. So here I have the list of all my articles here, and I can take a look at the individual results. So for example, here there was an article about a stray pooch in Washington State that used up, whatever it is, some article. And then here I have my prompts and the final inferences here generated by 3 models that I selected for that job. So I can look into individual results for this data set, but I can also look at aggregate results at the top here with those plots. So in this case, in this job, this past job, I was comparing Flan T5, Llama 2, and Falcon. And I can see, for example, that the Llama 2 here has the highest score compared to the other 2 models. So Llama 2 was the one that generated the least amount of hallucinations from my initial data set. Then here I am evaluating for formatting, so which one of those models were the best at generating exactly 3 highlights. So we can see here again that Llama 2 was the best at generating 3 highlights. And then this is the peak for the score of 3, which was more than 3 highlights were generated. So see the other models were sometimes generating more than 3 highlights, but Llama 2 was almost 100% of the time generating exactly 3 highlights. And then here, this was another property that I had to measure how many sentences were generated in the summary to see that if the models were actually following the instructions that I had given it to use at most 2 highlights per 2 sentences per highlight. And so on. You get the gist. These are aggregate metrics across the entire data set, and this is how you do evaluation at scale, how you get a really statistical sense of which of those models perform better on your task. So if you want to do this, I encourage you to build up this evaluation data set. So, a few hundred examples is good enough to get started, and then try to figure out exactly what you're trying to evaluate so that you can define those metrics here. And I encourage you to have very sort of simple and focused metrics. The more you're trying to evaluate complex and wide-ranging metrics, the less performance the AI scoring model is going to be. But this is essentially how you do evaluation at scale, and you can do this with Airtrain. This is free to use for data sets up to 10,000 rows. So this is how Airtrain works. We also do fine-tuning. So as I mentioned in my introduction, we believe that in the future most companies are going to use smaller fine-tuned models for specific tasks in order to have cheap on-prem models. And so we can help you transition from your reliance on GPT-4 to an on-prem small model. So feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in that. So switching back to the slides to conclude. So you can get started for free. Use the playground as we saw in the beginning. We have a wide selection of open source models with different sizes and variants, and also proprietary models. We have Gemini and the OpenAI models. You can do, as you just saw, batch evaluation as well, and fine-tuning as well. So feel free to reach out to us. We also have a Slack channel, so if you want to ask questions and get our advice on your particular task. Also, we have a YouTube channel where we post weekly videos on news in the AI world or tutorials to get started and so on. So check it out at Airtrain.ai on YouTube and subscribe now. And that's it for me. So happy to answer questions now.
Wonderful. Okay, Q&A. Are you guys ready? First question from me. I was on the live stream for a moment doing my thing, so forgive me. If my question is, with defining, how much flexibility does the user have in defining the evaluation parameters and the scoring system? How much flexibility for the user on that?
Yeah, so let's take a look at the form again. So you have, you're free to use whatever data set you want. So either a JSON-L file or a CSV file. So it's up to you to build this data set. For example, use real traffic from your app maybe to build this data set. And then you can choose any of those models here. And for each model, you can select the variant. You can select the temperature and the prompt. So different models sometimes respond better to different prompts, so you can set different prompt templates for different models. And then I presume your question is mostly about this third part here, how much flexibility you have in evaluation. So we have those unsupervised metrics that are very basic, and length, compression, and density may not be useful for your use case, which is why we offer this AI scoring where you can evaluate for almost arbitrary properties. So it could be creativity, playfulness, politeness, toxicity, the model will return anything toxic, and so on. So we encourage to really segment very focused properties instead of saying, tell me how this model did. This is not going to work well. But if you are very specific, was this model polite? And then you give out a rubric of scores from 1 to 5. Score of 1, the model was rude. Score of 5, the model was very polite, and so on. This helps the model figure out how the scoring model evaluate your outputs. And then the last method we have is JSON schema validation. So a lot of people use models to generate JSON payloads, but not all models will generate JSON that is even parsable or is compliant with the schema that you require. So you can use the JSON schema standard to define a schema and paste it here, and we will validate all the outputs generated by the model, and we can tell you which of the models perform best. For example, I think I have some results here. So this is a comparison of all those models here as to which of the models do the best at generating JSON. So here we can see that Mistral Medium, for example, has a 100% pass rate, is the best at generating JSON, and the other best one is GPT-4. So this is the last method we have. Yeah.
Remarkable.
Hey, do you guys offer, I guess, an upload of models? Like if I update an open source model or whatever, want to?
So we offer a way to upload your own inferences. So here in the form, if you want to evaluate a model that is not present in this list, you can do custom model here, and we will assume that you have uploaded the inferences as part of the input data set. So we're not allowing you to load any open source model because different models require different serving infrastructure. So we can't just serve any arbitrary model. We're not Hugging Face. But we let you upload your own inferences if you want to evaluate them. And if there's a particular model that you want us to support, feel free to jump into Slack and reach out to us.
Oh yeah, thank you. I must have missed this, but if you have labeled data, wouldn't you want to break up your data into the training set, into the validation set, test set, and then just do a scalar dot product to see what the difference is? That way you could judge how well. Is that what you want as a quantitative number to see how good your model is versus these?
Yeah, so this process here that I showed, you should do it on your eval set. So let's say you have a data set of let's say 1,000 entries, and you're using maybe 900 of those to do your fine tuning, and you're setting aside 100 entries for evaluation. This is where you should use this data set for. So you should not use any of the training data, obviously, to evaluation. Otherwise, you're skewing your evaluation. And this is how certain models end up at the top of the leaderboards. They train on the evaluation set. So here you should upload only your evaluation set. In the future, we'll provide also a similar form to do fine tuning where you can do your split as well as part of the flow here.
Curious to know what is the model that you're using for model grid evaluations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at this time, we actually are using GPT-4. It is the best out there, as I made the case earlier. And we are using GPT-4 on Azure, which is a little bit cheaper for us. But it is still the best model for arbitrary evaluation. We are going to provide soon models, smaller and faster models for specific things. So for example, if you want to test for toxicity, we are going to provide models to test for toxicity or for groundedness or things like that. So if you want to test for a specific case, you can definitely fine-tune a smaller model to do that. But if you want to be able to test for arbitrary properties, GPT-4 is still the best out there.
I assume you would have fine-tuned the GPT-4. It's GPT-4 you can't fine-tune, but you're just directly writing those prompts, and is it more like multiple short prompting that you're doing?
Yeah, so we do have our own chain of prompts in the back end that takes your own description of the property that you're trying to evaluate, and we set it in our own prompt template that essentially guides the model to generate a score from 1 to 5 and to be consistent and so on, so that we can generate those plots.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi. Can you use Microsoft Phi in production? I know is it open source? And
it is open source, and they just changed their license to MIT a couple weeks ago, which means that you can use it for commercial use cases. However, I would encourage you to do your own homework and do some evaluation because it hasn't been fine-tuned for instruction following. It hasn't been fine-tuned for human preference. There are some fine-tunes out there. There's a DPO fine-tune that essentially is equivalent to like RLHF for better results. But for example, for toxicity or things like that, I would encourage you to test it and not just blindly put it out there. But it's a very promising model that is worth looking at.
One thing I found about this kind of testing is summarization will work really nice. What about kind of a generation? So when you generate, like even same model with same prompt, it will generate like a different result. So then how do we test that kind of scenario?
Yeah, so for example, you could have an eval scenario where you have a data set of 100 entries and all of the entries are the same, which means that you're going to prompt the model 100 times with the same input. And you can have some eval property to see if, on average, the model is consistent in terms of like what politeness or creative or whatever you're trying to generate. For example, the other day I was trying to test how models perform at generating random numbers. Actually, I may have the job somewhere here, random number selection. And so I think I was, so essentially I used this scoring method to see what was the numbers that were being generated. So a score of 1, the model selected 1, a score of 2, the chatbots selected number 2, and so on. And as you can see, there was a huge bias towards the number 4, which is very interesting. And I actually saw the same during the vibe check. I was asking the models to generate a number from 1 to 5, and very often 3 and 4 came up. So models are not very good at generating random numbers, ironically. So you can use this tool in very different ways like this, not necessarily just to evaluate on different inputs, but for example, to generate arbitrary content like a random number and evaluate the outcome.
Thank you.
Let's go to the next question. So I don't think I'll be building like a roulette gambling app with an actual credit card and so on.
Hi, that was a great presentation. Thank you. I have a few questions. So you mentioned that the data source limit is 10K. Any plans in the future to up that number? Because I'm sure a lot of people are dealing with the catastrophic forgetting aspect of the model, remembering things in the beginning and the end, but not the middle, or if you have any suggestions on that. And then I also saw that you input like an API key for your ChatGPT 3.5 or something. So like for all the models that have paid versions, are you required, besides just getting the free trial, to input your API key, so then you're paying like a second level? And the third question is like, because this is really interesting to me, can you actually do model explainability testing on a fine-grained detail of like individual instances of what each of the outputs were, just to understand what the real problems are in a batch setting?
Yes, so let me answer your questions in order. The first question was, size of the inputs. So the reason why we have a limit on it is because this tool is free. And so obviously, if somebody uploads a data set with like 1 million entries, then all our GPUs are going to be heating up for this one user, and other users are kind of left in the dust. So this is why we have this limit. If you have a use case for larger data sets, we will be happy to accommodate you. Feel free to come and talk to us. But in general, what we saw is that with a few thousand entries, you already get a sense of how the model performs. So we don't have error bars on those things because obviously these are scores that are generated by an AI model. But it's rare that you need more than a few thousand entries to get a sense of how your model performs. So that's question number one. Question number two, on the API keys. It is true that if I go to the playground, if you add any of those proprietary models, we ask you to add your key at this time. Because those models cost money, and so this tool is free, and so you're adding your own key. It's a pretty common pattern. Many tools out there that rely on, for example, GPT-4 will ask the user to add their key. We have been thinking about potentially asking the user to add a payment method instead, so that we can basically forward the cost that we have to pay for Gemini or GPT-4. We launched this playground yesterday, so we haven't built that yet. But if it's a problem for people to get API keys, we would be happy to do that. The GPT-4 API keys are fairly easy to get. The Gemini API keys are a little bit harder to get. We actually have a blog post on the website to explain how to get those keys. But at this time, yes, we are asking people to bring their own keys. Last question about explainability. Yes. So the best answer I can give you is that when you have I'm going to bring up this example again. Let me make this a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller so that we can. So here you can browse through your entire data set and look at individual examples. So for example, this entry number 8, here are the values for the AI scores for groundedness, formatting, and so on. And then you can dive deeper into the actual inferences that were generated for this input. So we don't quantify explainability, but you're free to craft your own scoring properties to kind of extract this information and then browse through your evaluation data set and look at examples one by one. In the future, I think we will also like to add some feature where you can click on certain values here in the plots at the top, and it will segment the list of inputs for the inputs that are in that bucket, so that you can click the low performers, for example, click here on a score of 1 and see all the inputs that were performing poorly on this score. But yeah, that's as much as we have at this time.
Wonderful. Let's give Emmanuel a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Emmanuel is also speaking at our conference. He's also here for networking. So if you have any more questions, by all means. But yeah, we're pleased to have Emmanuel and Airtrain involved with the conference. In fact, all 3 speakers of our tonight, CodeRabbit, Canva, Airtrain, are conference partners. So we thank them very much. If you had a good time tonight and you want to show support, please follow us and like us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you're interested in presenting here, you can reach me at the email I emailed you on tonight for RSVP. We have our next events listed on the meetup page. Those are all live, so check them out. And those are here. So AI for Developers will do this on March 5th. That's our next event. So check it out. And we have AI for Marketers on February 21st and AI for Designers on February 28th. And with that, let's begin open mic. This will kick off our networking session. This is just a chance for you to stand right here and introduce yourself and get things kicked off. We only have a few minutes, so if you'd like to, yeah, come on up. You don't need to raise your hand. Just, if you can, just get sort of near this area, and we'll queue you up. And if we can, let's limit these announcements to maybe 30 seconds, just in the interest of time.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ayush. I'm the founder of Portkey AI. Portkey is the control panel for AI applications. And I just want to talk about the AI gateway that we recently open sourced. It's a common interface which allows you to interface with 100+ models, proprietary and open source, in one common OpenAI specific API format. So even if you want to talk to Anthropic or Ollama or any other models, it provides you a common interface which you can just use OpenAI format, and the gateway takes care of request and response transformations. It also allows you to do things like load balancing, caching, fallbacks, and a bunch of those tooling that makes your AI application more reliable and accurate on production. Excited to mention that our gateway has processed more than 350 million LLM calls so far, and it processes around 2.5 billion tokens a day, and that's just to say that it has been better tested. And within a week of launch, we have seen great engagement from developers. It has crossed around 3,000 stars on GitHub. So I think would love for all you folks to try it out. And if you have any feedback, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ayush. And next announcement.
Hey everyone, good evening. My name is Scott Frank. My business partner and I are working on AI applied to law. He's already got a really great business, and we think that there's an interesting opportunity to apply some more technology. My background is as an entrepreneur and in product. So if there's anyone who is interested in speaking more, I'd be happy to tell you more about the business and the idea tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Emery?
What's up, guys? I'm Emery. I'm the founder of Swayware, and we're actually a people data platform. So we do a variety of tasks. Most notably, we can identify everyone who lands on a website. We can capture their email and information, even if they don't provide it to you. Another cool thing we have a variety of APIs that developers can use to ingest real-time personal level data into their applications for personalization, marketing, and other purposes as well, too. So happy to talk about it.
Thanks, Emery.
Hi everyone, my name is Devanshu Brahmbhatt. I recently launched a platform to make research paper accessible to everyone. We did the second iteration like a week back. So on our platform, you can find the research paper easily with the advanced filters. We help you to understand any research paper. We have 250 million of research paper available on the platform. You can understand any paper with the AI explanation and the chatbot. And the most important part, you can also apply, you can learn how you can apply the research paper to the real world. It can be a startup idea or the patent opportunity. So we are aiming to make research paper accessible to everyone. That's the motto. And we launched the platform. We have more than 4,000 registered users on the platform. And now I'm looking for the full-time product management opportunities. So anyone want to chat about the product management, I'm here to talk. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Deepak Kagadia. After 8 years at Google, I'm starting my own company. I left in October. Basically, I use AI to automate a lot of the work that network engineers do to figure out what's going on with the network. I was doing it part-time while working full-time at Google for the last 4 years, but now I decided to take the plunge. So we have some paying customers, but they're in India. Now we're trying to penetrate US. So if anybody wants to get involved, especially in the sales and marketing, that's where we really need the help. That's about it.
Thanks very much. And we probably have time for maybe 2 more.
Hi everyone, my name is Ella and I'm a founder of DebtZero.ai. We are resolving debt with AI. We're a fintech startup. Happy to talk to anyone who's interested in fintech or interested in getting engaged with early stage startup. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, come on up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe. I'm the founder of AI. And so what we're trying to do is automate software development. We have an MVP that allows you to take a Jira ticket and a GitHub repository and automate coding tasks, basically using Gen AI to take a look at your request and then look at your code base, make code changes, and to make an automated pull request. Our end goal is eventually to allow anybody with an idea to build software just through natural language and not having to know how to code. So if that's interesting to you, please look at our website at CintraAI.com. And if you're building in the space, I'd love to talk to you and collaborate on ideas. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. And I think we just do like one last 30-second announcement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karthik. I'm an indie developer who launched a couple of apps recently. One is called the Gen Creator, which uses AI to automate your social media tasks like ideation, generation, and posting. And the other one is called the Photo Phrase, which uses AI again to generate social media captions for all your images. You can simply select your tone, style, platform, and all those things and generate social media captions and post it. Give it a shot and let me know what you think. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we should probably call it at that. I think I'll take the final announcement, which is thanks for attending. That's my email address. And get in touch. And there's the conference one more time if you want to register. Tonight is the night. So let's do some networking, meet each other, and build some community, enjoy some pizza, have some beverages, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks very much, and thank you, LinkedIn.